Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. As we record this, I spent yesterday installing a rain barrel platform, putting in the barrel, and installing the diverter into the downspout. Then I went to a friend's house and I dug up several plants to move them. I helped install a series of latticework and some climbing plants for his backyard, and then planted those climbing plants. We ended up doing physical labor all day in the hot sun, and despite getting a ton of stuff done, today I'm feeling the aches and pains. You might say that today's pain is paying the piper for the progress made yesterday. According to Oxford English Dictionary, to pay the piper means, quote, to pay the price of something, to answer for one's actions, end quote. Well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's basically what this means. If you're paying the piper, you're paying for the consequences of your actions.
Okay.
Or it doesn't have to be yours. It can be, culturally, we'll see examples as we walk through this that it could be, communities paying that price, or, families or groups of friends or whatever it is, nation states. It could be lots of different things, but it's to pay the price for something. That's what we're looking at here.
Okay. See, I guess I kind of thought paying the piper was almost like paying an entry fee or something. I think I and I could see where that would be, like, kind of conceptually you could say that, but yeah, this is a little different than what I think I've used it for or thought it meant.
Right. Well, and there is an alternate saying that uses pay the piper that is he who picks a tune pays the piper, which can mean this exact same thing, but it can also, be like a, driver picks the music and shotgun shuts his cake hole kind of thing, So
yeah.
it could also be like that. The person who is using the thing, and the person who's in charge is the one who should be paying for it, right? So there is also that kind of a tale on that too, but we're going to stick with paying the piper, and we're going to see it work in, and we'll even see that version of the phrase get used to mean the same thing as we're meaning with answering for actions or to pay that price.
Okay.
So there is a common story on the internet that this phrase originates from the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Quick synopsis, if you're not familiar with the story of the Pied Piper, is that in 1284, the town of Hamelin, which is in modern-day Germany, had a rat problem. And this mayor of the town offered a ton of wealth to whoever would remove the rats. A piper played his tune and led the rats away, but the mayor refused to pay, and so the piper came back, played another tune, and took all of the children away. The University of Pittsburgh has a website with many of these stories over the centuries, and you can explore that as you wish. I will link to it on the Patreon, patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, and on our website, bunnytrailspod.com. And you can go in and see all the different versions of this story that have been told over the centuries and see what this looks like. But the difficulty here is that there is no direct reason to attach this story to the phrase, other than it sounds like they should go together, right? And because the moral of the story is you have to pay the piper, right? I mean, if I were to look at it now and backwards put in a moral to the story, then I would say that's the thing. But this is a real event. Like, this was a real thing that happened. So there's not necessarily a moral to it, right? So because it's a real thing that happened.
It's not a parable or
right. It wasn't like a fable that was written
yeah.
specifically. This is a real thing that's happened, and then different folks have taken that story and embellished it in some ways and told it in others. But yeah, so while the story was told and spread in Hamelin, there isn't any evidence to show how the phrase would have spread to the English-speaking world in the United Kingdom, which is where we see the idiomatic phrase originate.
Okay.
Now, of course, there were Germans in UK throughout history, and at one point the House of Hanover ruled England for almost 2 centuries, but that started with George I in 1714. And we have seen the phrase being used in England almost a century before that. So we're just going to jump into the phrase first, and we're going to come back to the Pied Piper. The first time I found our phrase in print is from a book of plays called The Works of Benjamin Jonson, the second volume. Our phrase is found in the play A Masque of the Metamorphosed Gypsies. And this book itself was written in 1640, but the play in the book is dated August 1621. So that's what we're using. In it, 3 characters have just been robbed of their purses, and one is complaining about it. Quote, "What was there in thy purse thou kept such a whining? Was the lease of the house in it? Or thy granum's silver ring? No, but a mill sixpence I'd loved as dearly, and a 2 pence I had to spend over and above, besides the harper that was gathered amongst us to pay the piper." End quote.
Okay.
So the next one that we see, that's 1621. The next one that I found that I thought really highlighted what we're looking at was in August of 1681. And this is from Heraclides' Riddens, a dialogue between jest and earnest concerning the times, issue 29. This was a weekly newspaper that had an unusual theme, where 2 characters would speak to each other. One named Ernest, spelled not like the name but as the emotion, presumably the more serious of the 2, and one named Jest, a witty, wisecracking type. The work that we're referencing here is kind of that battle between the Whigs, which were a Protestant group, and the Tories, which were a Catholic group in England during the waning years of Charles II's reign. Now, I'm not certain who the subject in the piece is, whether it be someone like Protestant activist Stephen Coleridge, who was executed at the end of August, or Lord Shaftesbury, who was arrested for treason in early July and was, at this point, in the Tower of London. Or perhaps the piece was referencing the king or one of his supporters. I have to admit, I don't have a depth of knowledge of the ins and outs of politics in 1681 England, so I'm not 100% sure who it's referencing here. But to be fair, I don't think it matters much for the phrase. I think we still understand the way the phrase is being used anyway. So, going to the work, I'll start with Ernest first. Quote, "And yet he inwardly trembles at the approaching 17th of August as the day of doom. And though he knows he shall be there apparently convicted, yet he seems to pluck up a good heart and sets the best foot forward, in hopes he shall still persuade the people to believe only what he pleases." End quote. So that's the more serious take on it. And Jest's response, quote, "And therefore, like a true hocus, he calls all the mists he can before men's eyes, knowing that if all his tricks, juggles, wheedles, and intrigues come to be discovered, after all this dance he has led the nation, he must come to pay the piper himself." End quote.
Okay.
So I like that. It was almost like Ernest was saying one thing and Jess is like, yeah, this is what I heard you just say. So one more from this time frame, and this is the title of a 1691 pamphlet. Quote, "England must pay the piper, being a seasonable discourse about raising of money this session." End quote. Now, this pamphlet spoke on the need to raise funds following what is known as the Glorious Revolution in England, which saw James, who became king after Charles II's death, deposed in favor of James's daughter, Mary, and her husband, William the Orange. The point is, we see the phrase in use well in the 1600s, right? It's in a lot of places. And the popular tale of the Pied Piper didn't hit larger markets until 1803 with Johann van Gogh's German language poem, The Ratcatcher. And then later, the publication of the Brothers Grimm Children and Household Tales, also in German, in 1812. So I'm not saying the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin is not the origin of this idiomatic phrase. We just don't have any evidence to say that it is either.
Okay.
I will note that the popularity of the 2 works I mentioned, the Ratcatcher poem and then the Brothers Grimm's stories, right? So I do think that those works probably brought this concept, right, that story to a broader audience, and it would have cemented why you should always pay the piper his due. But like I said, it is a real story. So we're going to look at the real events of 1284 Hamelin in our behind the scenes video, which airs every Friday on our Patreon. Patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. For now, let's jump back into our phrase. This next one is from the Gentleman's Magazine, dated April 1731. And this entry is April 3rd. It's likely referencing the Treaty of Vienna, which was signed March 16th of 1731. History buffs will know that there are several treaties of Vienna, but this one effectively ended the Anglo-French alliance that had been in place since 1713 and replaced it with an Anglo-Austrian alliance, which included George II of Great Britain, and then Charles VI, who was the Holy Roman Emperor and Archduke of Austria. Spain would later sign on too, but they were not a part of it at the time of this publication. So the poem is introduced with this line, "As to the common saying, who is to pay the piper?" And the insinuation which Mr. Danvers has put into the following meter, "'Tis but by way of simile." And here is the poem itself, quote, "Have you not seen, as country wake, a crew of dancers merry make? They figure in and figure out, go back to back and turn about. They set, take hands, they cross, change sides. Each movement a Sarab minstrel guides. Around the measured labyrinth trace, till each regains the former place. So certain potentates two couple, leagued in alliance, height quadruple. After a maze of treaties run, are ere just where they first begun. I won't affirm who led this dance, yet for the rhyme, suppose it France. But this I dare at least to say, old England must the piper pay." End quote.
Okay.
I thought that was really good. I was like, wow, that's very fun.
Yeah.
France was not a part of this in any way, shape, or form, which is why I think he says, "Yet for the rhyme, suppose it France." So that's interesting. But yeah, I like that. Old England must the piper pay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So this next one is from the 1800s, January 2nd, 1802 to be exact. This is out of the Alexandria Advertiser and Commercial Intelligencer, Virginia, USA. It's referencing a discussion surrounding the war between Napoleon's France and George III's Great Britain, and the thought of the U.S. joining. Quote, "Where an enterprise is undertaken with a view to individual benefit, it does not comport with my ideas of justice or the principles of our social compact that the government should run the risk or indemnify if the adventure should miscarry. They who dance should pay the piper." End quote. This one I really like because it really highlights, in this case, some of those other variations on the phrase that we've heard. The ones who are dancing are the ones who would pay the piper. So in this piece here, this is Napoleon and George III's war, right? And France really wants the U.S. to be joining on their side. And there's still some animosity here between the newly formed United States, which was formed in 1775, and this is barely 25 years after that. And France definitely helped quite a bit during that time frame. What in the U.S. we call the Revolutionary War. So this time frame, there's definitely some feeling that maybe we should be on France's side, but there's also that feeling that not everybody loves what Napoleon is doing.
Right.
So in this case, there's kind of this little isolationist thing, but there's also just the risk, the recognition that if the U.S. steps into this, it's U.S. taxpayers who are going to be on the foot for it going wrong if it does, right? And so the point is, the ones that are dancing, France and Great Britain, they should be the ones paying the piper, not the American taxpayers for someone else's war, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was an interesting take on that piece, and I thought it was very interesting because we still continue to have the same kinds of conversations surrounding war even today, at least in the U.S. and I'm sure other countries as well, whether or not the price that we would pay for potentially joining the war and it going badly or well, either one, but the price that we pay for that, is that worth the opportunity cost of us not joining and it going the other way, right?
Right.
So that still continues to be a question. Now we're going to look at the 1900s with this poem published in the Palestinian out of New Jersey, USA, dated November 1st, 1910. This poem is called "Paying the Piper" by T. Brunswick Hoistus, and it highlights the disparity in America between those with wealth and those without it. Quote, "Every day we hear the clatter of the shoon upon the way. Every day the piper shrilling devil's music asks to pay. Every day go down in anguish and dishonor those who fall 'neath the baneful lure insistent of the piper's piercing call. All who wander from the pathway, all who hooky play from school, soon late must fill the pinching of the piper's changeless rule. Soon or late must pay the piper, if they join or pleasure take, in the maze of giddy dancers that are whirling in his wake. Some who riches have in plenty, oftentimes with golden spell, keep the urgent piper silent, though they dance a dance of hell. Sleeking back into the schoolroom, stealing back into the path, as the golden shield protects them from the menace of his wrath. But to those whose flattened purses cannot stay the piper's tongue, unto those disgrace, dishonor by the world are swiftly flung. For the saying, though most ancient, yet is strictly, sternly true, those who dance must pay the piper. Who are dancing, friend, are you? End quote.
This is very poetic. Like there's a lot of these things going on with this one. With
Yeah,
this
there's a
phrase.
lot of. I really like I really just like the metaphors that are being put in here. There's a lot of allusions in this that I think are really interesting to delve into. I spent a little bit of time and I went back and forth on whether or not I should read this whole poem or whether I should just read the part that has our phrase in it. But
Right.
it almost the phrase the stanza that has the phrase at the end, because it's kind of the culmination of this poem, doesn't hit if you don't have the whole poem. And it was only
Right.
4 stanzas. So I was like, all right,
Just
we're going
read
to do
it.
the whole thing.
Nice.
All right, one more before the break. This one comes from a syndicated article called Kathleen Norris Says. I found this version in the Eli Minor out of Minnesota, USA, and it's dated March 21st, 1940. I'll read the title and the first paragraph. Quote, "We all have to pay the piper for our mistakes. When we are young, we call the tune, and when we are old, we pay the piper. It's a terrifying thing to think of, but it's one of the inescapable facts of life. The cross you make for yourself in youth, you must carry in old age. Nobody else can carry it for you, and there's no putting it down." End quote.
Okay.
I I love the I love the 1940s sentiment that we're all in this in the same way. We're all in this together. They've come out of World War One. World War Two is beating on the doors. Not necessarily the U.S. yet, but it's definitely that concept is still for fear of what Nazi Germany at the time would be doing, and there was just a push for we're all in this together in the U.S., despite the 1910 poem very clearly showing we are not all in this together. And I think that's the funny thing about this, if you'll pardon me using funny when I mean disappointing,
Right.
but is that it is actually not an inescapable fact. There are definitely people who can use the golden shield, so to speak, and avoid carrying that cross from their youth. There are some who do not have to carry that cross, and others that do. So that's interesting. But the message, nonetheless, for 1940 here is clear. We will pay for our actions, and our decisions can have lasting consequences in our lives. Well, with that, it's time to move to our more modern uses. But first, we need to say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons on Patreon. And the cool thing about Patreon is it is 100% free to join the community. We have new things every weekday on the feeds. On Mondays, we have a conversation about what movies, shows, books, podcasts, and whatever else everyone is enjoying. Tuesdays see early access to the week's podcast. Wednesdays have all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode. Thursday has patrons-only polls, and Fridays are our lightly edited behind-the-scenes video featuring all the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts you could imagine.
We've got some other pretty cool stuff too, like original digital artwork once a month made by Shauna, and direct access to Talk With Us. No algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe does every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsig Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon.
That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
Okay, we're going to start our modern uses with the February 1956 edition of Worlds of If by Galaxy Publishing. This is where we find the James Blish work, To Pay the Piper, a short science fiction story. I'll read from a summary on the Project Gutenberg site. Quote, set against the backdrop of a post-apocalyptic Earth ravaged by biological warfare, the story delves into themes of survival, societal breakdown, and the consequences of human actions on both personal and global scales. Their narrative centers around a re-education project aimed at adapting humans to the toxic surface environment, exploring the moral quandaries associated with such an initiative. The novel culminates in a tense resolution that forces the characters to confront the price of survival in a world transformed by war. End quote. So this would be after World War II.
Yeah.
So and the readers would have all lived through that. So definitely, I think this kind of science fiction, like what could the future look like if we don't do things better? Because we've just had 2 world wars, and that I think most people were like, we can't do this again. We can't keep doing this.
Right.
Not that we've learned that lesson, but it's still it's still, that's why post-apocalyptic type of things hold the attention for many people is because they could see it as, in some ways, partially a realistic future. Pay to the Piper by the chairman of the board is a 1970 Detroit soul song. It opens with 2 repetitions of this line. Quote, if you dance to the music, don't you know, you've got to pay the piper. Ask your mama. End quote. Yeah, that was a fun song. I really liked it. It's good soul, music. It's nice. Pay the Piper by Barry McGuire is a song off the 1975 album Lighten Up. Pay the Piper is the 3rd track on the album, and it has a rockabilly vibe with a mean organ background played by Larry Knechtel. Each verse ends with the admonition that someday you have to pay the piper. Here's the last verse. Quote, now the show is ending, and everybody's going home. Well, some are going to go with Jesus, and some are going to go alone. Yes, and for every song you've sang, and every scene you've blown, well, did you know that someday you're going to have to pay the piper? End quote. Pay the Piper is also a pop song by Lolita Pop off the 1990 album Blumenkräfte. The chorus ends with these lines, quote, you can't keep the money, I'm leaving with the morning train. Pay the piper, cut the chain. End quote. I like this one because this is almost like the vibe is I'm gonna burn that bridge, so I'm gonna pay the piper, I'm gonna pay what I need to do, I'm cutting the chain, and then I'm making a clean break of it.
Right.
Which I don't really hear pay the piper used in that way very often. Usually it's paying the piper is a thing you don't want to have to do, and now but you need to do it. But I really don't hear it being used into that transition the other way. Usually pay the piper is the result of the thing, right? But here, paying the piper is the first step she's going to do to be able to make that clean break. So in this case, paying the piper is the first step in this story, whereas oftentimes paying the piper is the end of a story. Right. And I thought that was interesting to hear. Pay the Piper, a rock and roll fairy tale, is a 2005 short novel by Jane Yolen and Adam Stemple. Here's the synopsis from the publisher. Quote, a rock and roll band to die for? Callie is about to find out. Not much happens in 14-year-old Callie McCallan's sleepy Massachusetts town. So when the famous rock and roll band Brass Rat schedules a concert in the valley, it's big news. As a reporter for her school paper, Callie scores the scoop of a lifetime, a backstage pass to interview the lead singer of Brass Rat. Her friends are so jealous, but Callie isn't sure what the fuss is all about until she meets the band. Lead singer Peter Gringus and his bandmates are so cool, especially Peter. When he plays his flute, it's as if he has some sort of hypnotic power. But there's something strange about the band, something Callie can't quite put her finger on. Maybe she's just being weird, but it's as if they're from here, but not from here at the same time. It's when on Halloween night, Callie's little brother Nicky disappears, along with all the other children of Northampton, that she begins to wonder if her suspicions are so weird after all. It's crazy, but Callie thinks she knows why the children have disappeared and who took them. To prove it, and to rescue Nikki and the other children, Callie will be forced down a road that will lead her to a mythical world filled with fantastical creatures. A world from which there may be no return. End quote.
Okay.
So this one really mixes like the Pay the Piper piece along with allusions to the Pied Piper story.
Like it.
Pay the Piper is a 2022 English language opera composed by Anna Appleby, Ninfa Critwell-Reed, Cecilia Livingston, and Ailey Robertson, who together make up the inaugural participants of the Glyndebourne's Balancing the Score program. Here's a little about the opera from the Glyndebourne's website. Quote, based on the fairy tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, this new opera was composed by our Balancing the Score composers. The town of Hamelin had a problem with rats. It was completely overrun. They were making nests in people's clothes and eating all their food. The people of Hamelin looked to the mayor for a solution, and then a stranger came into town offering to get rid of the rats for a price. Pay the Piper features a chorus of 70 young people plus 3 professional singers, and its unique staging will transform the Glyndebourne Auditorium. Why you shouldn't miss it? It's a tale you know well, or think you do. But our version encourages you to consider the way you see the world and challenges you to question how reliable narrators are. How does someone's perception change the story? Just how accurate is memory, and how much is it colored by who we are and what we want to be true? End quote.
Okay.
Yeah, so this opera was a critical success and even won the Best Opera at the Young Audiences Music Awards in Britain. We'll link to the website where you can watch the full opera or see more about it. It has a runtime of just over an hour. I listened to the opening act, and then I popped into a little bit in the middle and a little bit at the end. I didn't have an hour, so I just popped in a little bit. Opera's not really my style of music, but this was almost more like a stage performance with opera music instead of, the other styles that you might run into. If you're a fan of opera or just stage musicals, I think this is something that you should check out. Pay the Piper is a 2024 novel by George Romero and Daniel Kraus. Yes, that George Romero.
Mm-hmm.
According to the publisher, this is a terrifying tale of supernatural horror set in a cursed Louisiana bayou from the minds of legendary director George Romero and best-selling author Daniel Kraus. So in 2019, while sifting through the University of Pittsburgh's library system, George A. Romero Archival Collection, that's the name of the system, the novelist Daniel Kraus turned up a surprise, a half-finished novel called Pay the Piper, a project few had ever heard of. In the years since, Kraus has worked with Romero's estate to bring this unfinished masterwork to light. And here's the synopsis of the book, again from the publisher. Quote, Alligator Point, Louisiana, population 141. Young Renee Pontiac has heard the stories of the Piper, a murderous swamp entity haunting the bayou, her entire life. But now the legend feels horrifically real. Children are being taken and gruesomely slain. To resist, Pontiac and the town's desperate denizens will need to acknowledge the sins of their ancestors, the infamous slave traders, the pirates Lafitte. If they don't, it's time to pay the piper. Perfect for fans of George A. Romero's pioneering horror movies or his previous collaboration with Daniel Kraus, The Living Dead, Pay the Piper is a thrilling tale of dark folklore, grisly murders, and the horrors that manifest when a community must confront its own shadowy past. Readers looking for gothic horror books will enjoy the chilling supernatural elements and the haunting southern setting, and anyone who enjoys scary books for adults will appreciate the chance to dive into this lost work by a celebrated horror icon. End quote.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you think it's awesome. I am not a fan of any of the things that they just mentioned. I don't like horror movies. I don't like horror books. I don't like the scary books. I don't like the chilling, supernatural, haunting, southern settings. None of that appeals to me in any way, shape, or form.
I love that stuff. I mean, there's other creepy things I don't care for, like clowns and dolls, but, the traditional scary or creepy, supernatural stuff. That's
Sure.
all. That's my jam.
All right. Well, good for you. Well, this phrase is one I've always enjoyed because it's one that I've understood from a young age. There is no free ride, actions have consequences, and at some point we all must pay the piper. Well, mostly anyway. And that concept doesn't really bother me. I'm the kind of person who does a risk analysis of everything I do. Yes, it is exhausting sometimes. So, recognizing possible outcomes before they happened has long helped me be more successful in life. It's rare that when I have to pay the piper, it's not something that I saw, but that is the thing that gets me most when I miss something. So, I'll do the quick risk analysis, and when I fail to recognize a possible outcome, paying that particular piper, that is the one I most dislike. So that's about all we have time for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon, patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It's poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, would you prefer to get a bonus equal to a week's pay, or would you rather get a week off fully paid? This one was evenly split. Mary said, quote, I would vote for the week off. People need time. That said, I gave my employees bonuses at the end of the year since they are all part-time, end quote. Jan added, quote, a bonus would be nice, but the university would likely never do that, so I'll just take some paid time off, end quote.
Emily said, quote, my vote is paid bonus, end quote. I'm with Emily. I'm voting for a bonus, but I absolutely understand the opportunity to have time off. I can see why folks might choose the time off instead. And in my current job, I would just take the bonus. But there have been jobs I've had in the past where I felt like I didn't get enough time to myself. I didn't have a good work-life balance, and I would have taken the paid time off in a heartbeat. Actually, I might have taken the not paid time off even. Like, I would have just been okay with that even just just for mental health and sanity reasons. But yeah, in my current situation, I'm definitely team paid bonus for me, but I get it. I get it both ways.
I'm in the time off camp as well. I have plenty of leave, but have trouble finding the right time to use it. So if I just have the week off, perfect. Well, as a reminder, our silly polls mean absolutely nothing and are not scientifically valid. And patrons of all levels, including our free tiers, can take part. Head over to patreon.com/bunnytrailspod to take this week's poll. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, remember,
Words belong to their users.